Have you ever noticed how exhausting it is to live your life like you're constantly being watched? Like every word you say, every decision you make, every post you upload has to pass through an invisible jury before you allow yourself to feel okay about it. You overthink texts, replay conversations in your head at 2 a.m., wonder if people secretly dislike you because their reply sounded slightly different than usual. And the craziest part? Most people are doing the exact same thing. Everyone is trapped in their own little courtroom, terrified of being judged by people who are equally afraid of judgment themselves. This episode is presented to you in the form of an audiobook. Today, we're diving into one of the most life-changing ideas you can ever encounter. The idea that the reason you're unhappy isn't because life is unfair, or because you aren't good enough, or because the world is against you. It's because you care too much about what other people think. The book, The Courage to be Disliked, by Ichiro Kishimi and Fumitake Koga, takes this uncomfortable truth and pushes it directly into your face. And honestly, it's kind of brutal. Because the book argues that most of the pain in your life is self-created, not because you're weak, but because you've built your identity around seeking approval. The authors explain that all worries are connected to other people in some way, even the worries that seem personal. Anxiety about your future, usually tied to how you'll be perceived. Fear of failure, often fear of embarrassment. Fear of rejection, fear of losing approval. They argue that there is no such thing as purely internal suffering. The shadow of other people is almost always present. And once you realize that, a very uncomfortable question appears. If your happiness depends on other people's opinions, are you actually free? Most people would instantly say yes, but think about it carefully. If your mood depends on likes, compliments, recognition, praise, validation, or being accepted by everyone around you, then your emotional state is controlled by forces outside yourself. That means other people are indirectly deciding whether you deserve peace or not. That's not freedom. That's emotional slavery with better branding. The book's core message is simple. If you want freedom, you need the courage to be disliked. Now that sounds harsh at first, because our brains are wired to avoid rejection. Nobody enjoys being disliked. But the authors aren't telling you to become cold or arrogant or rude. They're saying that if you spend your life trying to avoid upsetting anyone, you'll slowly abandon yourself in the process. Think about how many decisions people make just to avoid criticism. They stay in careers they hate because their parents approve of them. They stay quiet in conversations because they're scared of sounding stupid. They hide their real personality because they're afraid it won't be accepted. They live carefully edited versions of themselves just to maintain approval. And over time, they forget who they actually are. One of the most powerful ideas in the book comes from the psychology of Alfred Adler. Adler believed that human beings are not controlled by their past. Instead, we move toward goals we choose, even if we're not fully conscious of those goals. In other words, your behavior isn't just caused by what happened to you. It's also shaped by what you want. This is where the book becomes deeply uncomfortable because it challenges the way most people think about themselves. For example, imagine someone says, "I can't speak confidently because I have social anxiety." Most people would treat that anxiety as the cause of the problem. But Adlerian psychology flips it around. It asks, what purpose does that anxiety serve? Maybe the anxiety protects the person from rejection. Maybe if they never speak up, they never risk humiliation. Suddenly the fear isn't just a curse, it's also a shield. The book argues that many emotions work this way. Fear, insecurity, even self-hatred can sometimes become tools we unconsciously use to avoid risk. And before you get defensive, think about it honestly. How many times have you delayed starting something because you were scared of failing? How many times have you convinced yourself you weren't ready yet? Sometimes it's easier to call yourself incapable than to risk discovering your limits, because if you never try, you never have to face the possibility that you might not succeed. The authors also challenge the idea that your past permanently defines your future. Now, this doesn't mean painful experiences aren't real. Of course they are. Trauma affects people deeply. But the book argues that experiences themselves do not decide your destiny. The meaning you give those experiences does. Two people can go through similar pain and come out completely differently. One person may use suffering as proof that life is hopeless. Another may use it as motivation to grow stronger. Same pain, different interpretation, different direction. That's why the authors insist that your life is decided in the present moment, not in your childhood, not in your past mistakes, not in the labels other people gave you. Right now, in the choices you continue making. And honestly, that's both terrifying and liberating, because it means you can't blame your entire future on your past forever. But it also means you have more power than you think. Now here's where the book gets even more interesting. According to Kashimi and Koga, unhappy people often organize their entire lives around one goal: gaining approval. Think about how early this starts. As kids, we're rewarded for behaving correctly. Good grades earn praise. Obedience earns affection. Achievement earns recognition. Slowly, many people learn to associate worth with approval. And eventually they stop asking, "What do I want?" and start asking, "What will make people accept me?" The problem is that approval is unstable because it depends on other people's expectations. And those expectations constantly change. One group wants you to be ambitious. Another wants you to be humble. Some people admire confidence. Others call it arrogance. Some people want you to be emotional. Others think emotion is weakness. You can spend your entire life trying to satisfy everyone and still fail. That's why the pursuit of universal approval is impossible. And when people realize they can't win that game, they often become resentful. They compare themselves constantly. Someone else's success starts to feel like proof of their own inadequacy. Life turns into a competition for validation. You see this everywhere now. People aren't just enjoying life anymore. They're performing life, posting achievements, curating personalities, measuring their worth in views, likes, status, and attention. And underneath all of it is the same fear. Am I enough if people stop approving of me? The book says this mindset destroys relationships too, because when approval becomes your main goal, people stop becoming people. They become mirrors. You start interacting with others mainly to confirm your own value. That's why some people become bitter when their kindness isn't rewarded. They were truly giving. They were investing emotionally and expecting a return. For example, someone buys expensive gifts, constantly helps others, always says yes, and secretly hopes this will guarantee love and appreciation. But when others don't respond the way they expected, resentment appears. Because deep down, the kindness was transactional. The book challenges this by introducing a completely different way to live. Instead of seeking validation, focus on contribution. Not contribution because it makes you look noble. Not contribution because you're trying to appear like a good person. But contribution because humans naturally feel fulfilled when they know their existence positively affects others. This is an important distinction. The authors argue that happiness doesn't come from being superior to other people. It comes from feeling connected to them. And strangely enough, people who stop obsessing over approval often become far more attractive socially. Why? Because they stop performing. They stop desperately trying to be liked. Their energy becomes lighter, more genuine, more relaxed. Think about the calmest people you've ever met. The people who don't need to prove themselves every 5 seconds. They're usually the ones most comfortable being misunderstood. That's real confidence. Not loudly announcing how confident you are, not pretending not to care. Actual confidence is the ability to live according to your values even when not everyone approves. And that's difficult because rejection hurts. Humans are social creatures. We naturally want belonging. But the book argues that maturity means accepting a painful truth. Some people will dislike you no matter what. You can be kind and still be criticized. You can work hard and still disappoint someone. You can be honest and still be misunderstood. Trying to avoid all criticism is like trying to walk through rain without ever getting wet. Impossible. One of the most freeing moments in life is when you realize you don't need to win every person's approval to have worth. Because once you stop constantly asking, "What do they think of me?" you finally have space to ask a better question. What kind of person do I want to be? The book also emphasizes something modern culture forgets constantly. Happiness is not located in the future. Most people treat happiness like a destination. I'll be happy when I get the job, when I get the relationship, when I finally become successful, when everyone respects me. But if your happiness always depends on arriving somewhere else, you never actually live. You're constantly waiting for permission to feel fulfilled. Kashimi and Koga argue that happiness is found in the present moment through meaningful contribution and authentic living, not through endless comparison. And honestly, comparison is poison now. Social media turned everyone's life into a public scoreboard. Someone's always richer, prettier, smarter, more successful, more talented, more popular. If your self-worth depends on outranking everyone else, you'll never feel secure. because there will always be someone ahead of you in some category. That's why the authors reject the idea that life is a competition. Your worth is not reduced by someone else succeeding. Another person's intelligence does not steal your value. Another person's beauty does not erase yours. Another person's achievement does not make your life meaningless. But insecure people struggle to believe this because they measure themselves relatively instead of inherently. And that's exhausting. Imagine living every day mentally competing with strangers. Every room becomes stressful. Every interaction becomes evaluation. Every successful person becomes a threat instead of an inspiration. That's not living. That's survival mode. The courage to be disliked means stepping out of that endless competition entirely. It means accepting that not everyone will understand you. It means choosing authenticity over approval. It means understanding that freedom and universal acceptance cannot coexist. And maybe most importantly, it means realizing that your life belongs to you, not to the internet, not to your parents, not to your classmates, not to strangers, not to society's constantly shifting expectations. You. Now, this doesn't mean ignoring all feedback or becoming selfish. Other people matter, relationships matter, community matters, but living entirely for external validation is different from caring about others. One is connection, the other is dependency, and dependency will drain the life out of you. The book ends with a simple but powerful truth. No matter what path you choose, someone will criticize you. Someone will misunderstand you. Someone won't approve of your decisions. So the real question is this: if being disliked is unavoidable anyway, why waste your entire life trying to avoid it? Why not live honestly instead? Why not pursue goals that actually matter to you? Why not stop performing and start living? Because at the end of the day, the people who spend their entire lives desperately trying to be liked by everyone usually end up exhausted, resentful, anxious, and disconnected from themselves. But the people who accept rejection as part of life gain something much more valuable: freedom. The freedom to speak honestly, the freedom to choose their own path, the freedom to fail publicly, the freedom to grow, the freedom to be themselves without constant apology. And according to the courage to be disliked, that freedom is where real happiness begins.